Books. I eat books for breakfast, and the book, the Dickens book for May, is Martin Chuzzlewit. Okay, you may never have even heard of this book. Everybody has heard of Great Expectations. Of the Dickens books I've done so far, the one you probably hadn't heard of was Barnaby Rudge. That's really ill known. I have a friend who's supposedly shipping me a DVD version of some miniseries of Barnaby Rudge, so I'm very excited about that, and I might circle back to that. That said, there is an excellent miniseries adaptation of Martin Chuzzlewit, and before I read Our Mutual Friend, this was my favorite Dickens book. And so I'm just going to talk generally about the book and why I really enjoyed it. It sits in a sweet spot for Dickens in terms of it's not exactly light comedy like Pickwick. There's death in this. There's murder and suicide. And there's some other horrible things that go on. Say sexual harassment. It was not attempted rape, but there's some nasty stuff going on. But what Dickens does very well in this novel is what happens kind of in a suburb of London-ish and in London itself, and focuses primarily on the dynamics of the Chuzzlewit family. So Martin Chuzzlewit, to give you, a little bit of perspective, Martin Chuzzlewit is actually two men, just like Barnaby Rudge. So this was an interesting choice. He did it right after Barnaby Rudge, and he did the same thing. So he had a father and son named Barnaby Rudge. In this one, it's a grandfather and a grandson. And this supposedly, he does have a theme for this one, just as he gets more into theme novels later on. And the theme supposedly is pride, and it kind of is, but there's all sorts of things that come on, and it's about the nasty family dynamics that occur when you have one elderly, and that's, of course, the old Martin Chuzzlewit, rich man, who everybody's waiting to die, and are all conspiring to try to get at his riches. Who is going to inherit all that money? There's a kind of side issue where he has semi-adopted this girl, who his grandson falls in love with. And there's all this jealousy. It's not just pride, it's all sorts of jealousy, or maybe he doesn't say pride, but self-love. Both the old Martin and the young Martin have a problem, especially with regards to this girl, whose name I can't remember right now because I just restarted the book, and I'm sorry to say she's not one of the colorful characters in the book. In general, his heroines suck. They're just boring. Unlike Jane Austen heroines, definitely the Bronte sisters and their heroines are much more interesting than any heroine in Dickens. In any case, this book is chock full of just great characters, and I will probably do a video on each of them. The quote villain, there's actually two villains of the piece. There's a comic villain and there's a villain. The comic villain is Mr. Pecksniff, and he is great. And then there's the villain, who's a murderer, is Jonas Chuzzlewit. I think he's one of the cousins, the cousin of the young Martin Chuzzlewit, so the nephew or grandnephew of old Martin Chuzzlewit. Let's see, we have Mrs. Gamp and her Mrs. Harris. Mrs. Gamp is a private nurse who is a drunkard and is a complete liar and is always talking up herself using her fictional friend, Mrs. Harris. There's Betsy Gamp, who is a hospital nurse who works with, or is it Miss Prigg? No, not Betsy Prigg. Betsy Prigg works with Mrs. Gamp. There's, Tom Pinch, who he's not supposed to be the hero, but he is what I consider my favorite Dickens hero. And then there's Montague Tigg, or is it Tig Montague, who comes up with an entirely fraudulent life insurance company. And now you can see why I love this book. There is also, Charles Dickens actually was friends with an actuary and became friends with a life actuary in his own application for life insurance before he was going to go to America, because he was traveling around America when he was working on Martin Chuzzlewit. And some of the American stuff gets into the book. And that's where it really sucks. The American, he should have been ashamed for what he did in the American bits. I'm listening to the intro he did. So the version I'm listening to has an intro he did like 25 years after this was published. So he's older, and he actually went back to America. And he did several notes on this. And he did mention, there was this kind of civil war in between. So he did this in the 1840s. He went back to America after the Civil War. And obviously a lot of stuff had changed in the meantime. There's certain aspects of it I'll probably have a good sense of humor about it now, but it comes across quite ignorant, even though he supposedly is basing it on the stuff he experienced while in America. The thing is, he didn't really understand. And it doesn't matter, because he also had that same problem in England itself. He was excellent with regards to London and its immediate suburbs and kind of the whole society that went around that. There's other aspects that he did not portray so well, especially any kind of rustic country stuff, because he wanted to be a country boy, but he was a city boy. He was a Londoner through and through. Nothing wrong with that, but, Martin Chuzzlewit has a lot of great city scenes, a lot of great character interactions, and it's got an exciting plot other than the America stuff. As I said, there's murder and there's suicide. There's an investigation. There's some skullduggery in there. It gets very interesting. Yes, and there's some love matches and this, that, and the other, and some very ill-chosen marriages or proposals. So it's kind of still of a mess, still in the messy plot era, but this is a lot more cohesive, I think, than Old Curiosity Shop for sure, and it's got a lot more interesting characters. So, well, enjoy May.